Joined now by Adam Creighton, Washington correspondent at The Australian. Adam, thanks so much for joining us on the U.S. Report. And it seems like you and I are singing off the same song sheet here. You've written in The Australian this week with similar thoughts to mine that Joe Biden may not be the guy come next November. What's the mood in Washington? Tell us what you're seeing over there.
Well, look, I think the mood is that more and more people are thinking this, James. So we've had a number of left-wing publications recently, left-wing journalists come out and openly ask him to step aside. I mean, most famously this week, I thought last week, they had a long essay by a journalist there, basically saying he's too old at 80 and he's too doddery to run. And then, of course, you had Maureen Dowd in the New York Times. You write a scathing piece, basically saying that he's out of touch with modern sensibilities over his refusal to acknowledge his seventh grandchild. And then, of course, we had CNN's Fareed Zakaria just on the weekend, basically in a live interview questioning the president about why he's running again. And, of course, very politely, but suggesting that he's not up to it. So there's a number of articles coming out all around the same time. And, of course, this is against the backdrop of the scandals related to his son and potentially the president himself. And his obvious ageing. And we've still got 1.5 years to go, slightly less until the election. So there's a lot more ageing to go.
And Adam, I want to get to those scandals in just a minute. But before we do, who would you think the Democrats are talking about as the potential person to come and step in here? Because, of course, from where I sit, you've got this huge obstacle of Kamala Harris, who I don't think anybody would like to see ascend to the Oval Office, and yet because of the politics of succession and identity would be the person that an awful lot of Democrats would think would be next.
Yes, well, look, I think this is one of the reasons why Biden won't stand again, is because one of the attacks against him by Republicans will be that at some point during his second term, he may well pass away. And indeed, if you look at the actuarial tables, there's a 30% chance of that, which is pretty damn high. And that would, of course, mean President Harris. And so that's a real disadvantage of a Biden presidency there.
And just to go back to those scandals, too, which you mentioned, and this is a thing that, to me, really, I think is probably more disqualifying in the long run, even, beyond the age and the physical infirmities, is that the family itself, the Biden family itself, increasingly appears to be corrupt. Now, this week we saw this situation where whistleblower Gal Luft, he was indicted on federal charges, which included failing to register as a foreign agent, despite the fact that Hunter also failed to register as an agent for the exact same Chinese company. I mean, Adam, all of this screams double standard, doesn't it?
Yes, look, it certainly does. And also, too, I think it gives us a much better insight into what the purpose of this Chinese company was, this CEFC, I believe, a supposed Chinese energy company with close links to the CCP. I mean, they were paying, I think, $700,000 to Luft, who you just mentioned, and, of course, millions to the Biden family via Hunter and his associates. And so you realise that this Chinese firm was an influence peddling operation. And it makes it more likely, in my view, that the money was going to the Bidens to influence domestic US politics in some way or policy. So look, it's further embarrassment for the Biden family, and I think one of the reasons why his candidacy is less and less likely.
And yet it's amazing, you look at how the New York Times and all the other media outlets in the U.S. that are in the tank for the Bidens report the Luft story, and they act like this is the thing that discredits it rather than, as you say, suggests that the corruption runs very, very deep, and it gets to this double standard. There was a fascinating exchange between Representative Matt Gaetz of the House Judiciary Commission and Christopher Wray from the FBI about, this very double standard. I want to have a look at this clip here, and I want to get your reaction to it, Adam. Let's listen to this.
How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure, actually, that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
Well, the internet will remind you of that in moments.
Adam, doesn't this suggest this much broader problem, not just that there's a double standard, but that the FBI in the U.S. is now an agent of Democrats to run their political narrative.
Well, look, I mean, it's just a reminder that when you pass new laws that give agencies the power to spy on citizens and to expand the scope of government, then they zealously embrace them, and in this case, very, very overzealously. I mean, if that figure's anywhere near correct, that there are 1 million attempts to surveil American citizens, which were wrongly filed or wrongly inputted, that's frankly scary. I mean, whatever side of politics you're on. I mean, it's this court, the FISA court that they're talking about, I think was established in the late 70s, just for viewers, and it's a way law enforcement authorities can apply for the power to spy on Americans that they suspect might be foreigners. I think that's foreign agents, I should say. I think that's basically correct. And it's being massively overused. I mean, that is scary. So, I mean, that's the main takeaway for me. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, that is scary stuff.
And yet, it was the left growing up, to me, that was always about free speech and speaking against the government. Where are the Democrats? Are there any Democrats who are coming out and backing this
It's very sad.
in?
Well, I mean, as I've said recently, I mean, the Democrat Party is nothing like it was in the 60s and 70s. I mean, its core beliefs have changed radically. It's quite in favour of a very powerful state. It's not in favour of free speech. It wouldn't have any issue with these FISA, wrongful FISA applications. So, we're talking chalk and cheese there.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's also, of course, this whole issue of disinformation, which has become incredibly Soviet. And in fact, I think some of our Australian viewers might be seeing some similar issues with some of the legislation that Labor's trying to pass here. But there was a professor called Barbara McQuaid now who's going out and being feted everywhere for having a book coming out on disinformation theory. And yet her whole Twitter feed is all about the Hunter laptop being a Russian plot and everything else. I mean, how does the left look at themselves with a straight face on this? And, just for people in Australia here, how much do we need to be concerned that this same disinformation push by the left to censor the right in America is coming to Australia as well?
Well, look, I think it is very embarrassing. I mean, surely deep down for these people on the left who've been pushing things for years, which turned out to be false. I mean, I often say the people that talk about mis and disinformation the most are the ones peddling it the most. And the idea intellectually that the government can be the arbiter of truth is just, totally absurd. And yet, sadly, it's widely believed in some pockets of left-wing parties around the world. So it is a great worry. I mean, what's happening in Australia is deeply concerning to me because it is far, far more dangerous than anything that's happened in the United States. I mean, thank God here there is a First Amendment, which a judge in Louisiana has recently used to strike down, as you know, communication between the US government and the tech giants. But in Australia, there's no such First Amendment. And we've got this bill, which, may be passed. I don't know. I'm over here now. But it basically gives the government the right to censor anyone on anything on social media that they don't like. It's pretty extraordinary.
Unbelievable stuff. Adam Creighton from The Australian, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon here on the US Report.